Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Alex and this is TechFlow. Now, there's one thing you need to know about me, and that is that for the past, I want to say, 11 years of my life, I've been an iPhone user. So what does a typical person look for in a smartphone or a device that they're buying in 2020? A good battery, a decent camera, a modern UI, a decent screen. Well, you could just call it a day and go and get yourself a mid-range Android phone and be done with it. But what if you want all of those creature comforts like iMessage, FaceTime, device support and reliability, access to the App Store, which is ever growing? Something easy that's simple to use, something that's got a whole bucket of accessories that work along with it, like the infamous Apple Watch. And right off the bat, I can tell you firsthand that the iPhone SE 2020 does all those things really, really well. All of those things that seem to make iPhone, you've got here for £400. Instead of reviewing this, we need to take a different approach. We need to be looking at why you would buy this for £400 over this for £1,000. So if you have seen an iPhone 6, 7 or 8 in the last few years you've been alive, and you should have because that phone came out 5 years ago, then the iPhone SE will feel familiar. It's got a 4.7-inch LCD display with 326 ppi or pixels per inch. Now, this is a 720p display and probably the worst part of this phone. More on that later. They've essentially borrowed this display from the iPhone 8. The only thing it's gained on top of that is the True Tone technology, which I have turned off anyway. Another thing it's borrowed from the iPhone 8 is those huge bezels up top and on the bottom. Shame about that, really. You've got a home button on the bottom. Now, this isn't a button, it's more of a haptic button, so it doesn't actually press. The phone vibrates to simulate a press, which is fine. They've been doing this for ages. And surrounding that haptic phone button, you've got probably one of the fastest fingerprint readers on a phone to date, period. A-star. And overall, the device is really solid. I'm happy that Apple have stuck with what they know works. This phone is gonna last 5 years. Now first, those bezels. And it really, really annoys me and frustrates me, I think mainly because Android phones at a mid-range price point have seemed to be able to shrink those notches, and it really is quite funny and comical coming down to a screen this size with these huge bezels on when your daily drivers' phones have completely edge-to-edge screens. But I'd hazard a guess that most people buying the iPhone SE aren't coming from an 11 Pro Max, so that doesn't really matter. And the more I actually used this phone, the more I became to like it. It's quite interesting, actually. It's almost a little bit more refreshing using a smaller phone when I'm constantly using this phablet-sized thing in my hand day in and day out. Honestly, using this smaller phone feels refreshing. Now inside, it's got the same A13 Bionic chip as my iPhone 11 Pro. So, Alex, what did you just say? Basically, these two phones have the same processor chip inside of them, but are at totally different price points. How is that even a thing, and why? And I've boiled this down to two things, really. The first one being battery life, and the second one being future updates. Because that A13 Bionic chip is so powerful and power efficient, it makes this phone, number one, super fast, but number two, pretty good on battery when you're doing normal things like writing emails and sending text and phone calls, because that A13 Bionic can just fly through anything like butter. And I also think that Apple know people are still going to be using this phone in 5 years' time, and I would still expect it to have software updates in 5 years' time. In fact, it will, so that A13 Bionic is powerful enough for 5 years in the future. For example, this phone would be perfect for my grandmother because she's not like me. She doesn't change her phone every 1 to 2 years. She would be happy to spend $400 on this phone and have it last 5 years and still expect it to work in 5 years' time with all of the software updates, and it will thanks to the A13 Bionic. And it's also got some other tricks up its sleeve as well, like a pair of pretty decent stereo speakers, and it's also got wireless charging crammed into the back of it. So Alex, £400, complete iOS experience, what's it actually like to use? Honestly, it won't hang up on you. This phone is really fast. It's absolutely fine. However, the one thing I wasn't happy with was the display. First, those bezels again. But I just think it needs a little bit more resolution in its screen. Now, please note that at this price point, I think it's absolutely fine, and this isn't necessarily a complaint of mine. It's just this phone is so good at anything. I'm really trying to tell you guys my worst things that I can find about this phone. And the worst thing about this phone is its display. But it's not a bad display at all. It just could do with a little bit more PPI, a little bit more pixel dense. It just needs to be a little bit sharper. But like I say, this isn't a complaint. I'm not complaining that this display is 720p, because even though it is 720p, it is one of the best 720p displays you will find on any phone, period. I mean, just check out these viewing angles. You can look at the screen from any angle and it's perfect. The colors are fine, I just wish it was a little bit sharper. Now, a few years back, if you were to go out and buy a mobile phone for £400, you wouldn't be expecting the image quality of its camera to do bits for you. But something changed all of that last year, middle of last year actually. The Pixel 3a from Google was released, a mid-range phone with an absolute monster of a camera on it. So I'm going to be testing this SE versus the Pixel 3a in this video so you can see the side-by-side photos. Now the gap is really, really close here, and I'm really happy to see that, to be honest, but the iPhone definitely just takes the edge. And I suppose that's another reason as to why they put the A13 Bionic chip into this phone, because as well as that sensor being half decent, there's a lot of processing going on to these images in the background after they're taken, which I think results in the iPhone being much sharper. I mean, crop into the picture of these shoes, you can see that the iPhone image is just sharper. And even the dynamic range you can see in this shot versus the Pixel 3a, that we have much more data in the shot on the iPhone image. The dynamic range is just better, and so is the overall clarity of the images. The iPhone takes the win. I also wanted to do some comparisons between this, the iPhone SE at 400, and then my iPhone 11 Pro Max, which was like 1,300. And as you can see, we've got SE on the left, 11 Pro on the right. I mean, to be honest, I can't really tell that much of a difference. If you are really, really pixel peeping, then yeah, you're probably gonna say the iPhone 11 Pro is better. But for almost £700 more, that's definitely to be expected, right? I think the gap is extremely close here, a little too close for comfort. And as far as video is concerned on this bad boy, well, iPhone have just always had the best video anyway, so you can just take a look yourself. The video quality on this phone is very good, if not outstanding. We're in low light right now, and the stabilization on here is top notch, A-star. In fact, the video on the iPhone SE is that good, you're probably going to want to send it to an iPhone 11 Pro Max to view it, just because, well, on this screen, you're not even taking advantage of the 4K camera on here because the screen is only 720p. And I found that when taking images too on this camera, I'd take the picture on the iPhone SE, iCloud would then sync it over to my 11 Pro Max, I could then view it on here, and the viewing experience, just because the screen on this phone is sharper, was so much nicer. And both photos were taken on the camera on the SE. It's quite funny, really. So everything to do with the camera for me is A, if not a star, until it gets to night mode. Now, there just isn't a night mode here on the iPhone SE, which is really a shame because you have a pretty decent night mode on the Google Pixel 3a. However, it's just not to be seen here. Night mode or night pictures, it annoys me because Apple were doing so well and they've just thought, no night mode here. People paying £400 don't need night mode apparently. But I suppose it's just one of those tricks that companies do to make you buy the higher models, or make you seem like you need the higher priced devices. And that's the general synopsis really with this phone. You get the same iOS experience no matter what iPhone you buy, which is brilliant. But if you want these extra little gimmick features like night mode, or for example, this phone can record 4K 60 with HDR. This one, 4K 60. Do you remember that U1 chip that Apple boasted about on stage, where you can literally point your iPhone at another AirDrop device and it will know that it's there? Well, those sorts of chips you're not going to find in your SE. But again, for the majority of people, night mode in the camera, the U1 chip, and 4K 60 with HDR are not necessities. Now obviously with the phone being the size that it is, the one thing I was concerned about but not concerned about is battery life, and to put it clear, it's pretty good. You get an 18-watt charger included in the box, and because the battery is so small, that does charge up quite quickly. However, I did mention earlier that that A13 Bionic chip was really good at saving battery life and really fast when you're doing tasks like sending email or sending messages. However, the problem lies when that A13 Bionic chip needs to ramp up a little bit to, let's say, for example, play some games. Because the battery isn't the biggest capacity in this phone, when that A13 does have to ramp up, it goes down quite fast. So if you're thinking of buying this phone to do some heavy tasks, and which it will because it's powerful, like video editing or playing games for example, I'd go ahead and make sure you buy yourself a portable charger too. So Alex, the long-time iPhone user, what's your verdict of the iPhone SE? Well, all of the things that I've complained about are forgivable, really, at this price point. For example, the screen's not the best out there. It's a good display, it's not the best, but the phone's £400. What the SE does really well, what it has going for it, is the basics. It does the basics extremely well. It does the basics to the T. And that's a lot of things that phones at this mid-range price point seem to mess up on. They put like huge cameras in there, 128 megapixel cameras, edge-to-edge screens, and then the fundamental things that make a phone good, like a battery life or a user experience, are just snipped off. I think when you're playing around in this space to budget / mid-range prices, on the Android side you get a lot of these companies seeming to go ahead and put infinity edge displays on their mid-range phones, and this costs a lot of money, so therefore the user experience of the phone is just sort of missed out. What this does is the basics really, really well, and that's about it. Apple have made an affordable phone that's good, if not great, in every area, and I think if you want a mid-range phone, I wouldn't look too much further than this. But that's been it. Mine has been Alex. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.